It's exciting and wonderful for me to leave the U.S. and come to a place where reach is such a reality and where bureaucrats and regulators can talk so eloquently about what's already happened. Clearly, what happens in Europe is being paid attention to tremendously in the U.S., for better and for worse. And I'm going to be talking mostly today about what's going on in California because unfortunately there's not a lot of great stories to tell from the U.S. as a whole on a national scale. I was asked to speak about how does regulation lead and in fact support innovation. And so when I think about that, I come up with the frame of necessity is the mother of invention, and instead I'm thinking about regulation being the mother of innovation. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what's going on in California very briefly, and we'll have time this afternoon if we want to go into more details about what's going on in regulatory side on chemicals in California. So when we think in California about chemicals policy and about environmental issues, we often think of ourselves as an EU member state. And in fact, California thinks a lot about what's going on in the European Union, and we're very proud to consider ourselves one of you. Going back to now a little bit in time of Plato. So Plato said, necessity is the mother of invention. And when I Googled that, I got this image. So it's a very uniquely American view of innovation, but that is one way of looking at necessity leading to creativity of solutions. But clearly I'm going to be talking today about a very more serious driver of innovation, and that is regulation. That regulation creates necessity. That's the whole point behind it. Now, in the U.S., there is a huge push against this. This is called the Tea Party, folks. We've got a lot of other people saying that this is actually the downfall of states like California that are very heavy in the regulatory framework. And you'll see images like this where everyone is fleeing California, right? Because we are so heavy in our environmental regulations. So clearly, businesses are trying to get the heck out of California. Instead, though, when you look at the reality in California and other states where you have the most strict environmental regulations like New York and Massachusetts, that venture capital money, that those dollars are actually going to states. And this is a similar slide that we heard, a very different look, but similar concept to what's going on around the world, that dollars are following innovation. Innovation is not unlinked to environmental care. All right, so some specific stories about how regulation in California is actually stimulating innovation. Regulations drive the marketplace. This is what you heard from Eka, and you're going to be hearing, and you all in the environment in this room understand this. So here's some examples in California. And the examples I'm going to give, I'm going to start with some energy examples because that's a little bit more of a mature area where regulation has been in effect, very strong regulation in California, and the kind of innovation it has fostered, and then go into chemicals. So the first area of where regulation gives innovation is in procurement. And anyone here who is a large company understands that your decisions on procurement drive innovation. So does government. Government is a huge spender of money. And when we change our specifications, for example, e-peat computers or the kind of cleaning products we buy, that drives the marketplace, it drives innovation. Another area in California that's driven a tremendous amount of innovation is in the energy efficiency part, where California has the most strict energy efficiency requirements in the U.S. And in fact, when you look at the per capita energy use of California versus the U.S. over time, you can see that our policies have made real differences. And in fact, these policies have led since 1970 to a $74 billion savings for Californians. So regulation drives necessity. That necessity leads to innovation, which leads to cost savings. What's going on right now in California that's going to have tremendous impact on innovation is our cap and trade program. We're looking very carefully at Europe, frankly, at some of the problems that you've had with your cap and trade system. We've tried to learn from that in the way that we've valued each of these pieces of the cap and trade program. And in fact, we expect to put $5 billion next year into the into the California economy to drive innovation around carbon reduction. So we're very excited. That money, 25% of it, is allocated for communities that are considered disadvantaged. So we hope that there will be a significant environmental justice aspect to the cap and trade program in California, and it will drive tremendous innovation in the market. We also have, as part of that, a low carbon fuel standard, and that is a goal of a 10% reduction in our carbon intensity of our fuels. An example of how that's driving innovation is happening right now. There's a product called a renewable diesel, which is different than traditional biodiesel. You can switch 100% into engines, same ASTM standard, none of the problems of biodiesel. And in fact, when for San Francisco we looked at this, we're thinking about procuring this for our entire fleet. We expect a 50 to 60% reduction in our greenhouse gas because of just that switch to renewable diesel. So that's an example where cap and trade leads to low carbon fuel standard, leads to innovation in the fuels market, direct market development for an innovative solution. Now switching to the chemicals. California has something called Prop 65, which many of you may be aware of. It's essentially a sin list. It's a list of chemicals known to cause reproductive and developmental harm. The requirement of the law is to put this sign anywhere where products are sold or in buildings where products may be used with one of those chemicals. It's a very generic sign. And people joke about it a lot because you see it everywhere and therefore it seems to have no meaning. But the real innovation, the real effect of Prop 65 are not these signs. It's the substitution that they created because companies did not want to put these labels on their products. And so because of Prop 65, we had a huge push, and we continue to have a push, in substitution. Now, the problem with Prop 65 is a similar problem to when you simply have a list of bad actors. What do you substitute them with? And so the problem of Prop 65 was really the problem of regrettable substitutes. And so California has been recently adopting what I call a real paradigm shift. This is our reach, if you will, but on a much smaller scale, but a deeper scale. And that is what we're calling the Safer Consumer Products Program. And this is an initiative that I helped author when I was the head of the Department of Toxic Substances Control up until about 3 months ago. So here's how I summarize very briefly what this paradigm shift regulation is doing. It's forcing manufacturers to ask a very different question. Traditionally, what manufacturers ask, at least in the US, they ask the question, is it legal? Is it legal for me to put a carcinogen in this carpet adhesive? Perfectly legal to do so because we don't have laws that prevent it. Then they say, okay, well, maybe I should ask, is it safe? The problem with asking, is it safe, is it depends who you ask. You can get 2 feet thick of science saying it is safe. Somebody gives you 2 feet thick of science saying it's not safe, and therefore you're stuck in that paralysis of analysis. So instead, what California is going to ask, to require manufacturers to ask, if they want to sell products into California, is it necessary? Is it necessary for me to continue to make that carpet adhesive with a carcinogen, or is there a safer alternative? And this very high level is how it works. So we start, just like REACH does, with a list of chemicals. This is a list of lists, about 23 lists that we've put together, and we use the same wording of REACH very intentionally. We call this our candidate chemicals list, just like in REACH. Now the problem is you can't take a list of chemicals and answer the question, is it necessary? It depends on the use, right? Lead in what? Formaldehyde in what? You've got to link it with a product with a use. So then what California is doing is they select what they call priority products, specific uses of chemicals. Then any manufacturer who wants to sell that product containing that chemical into California will have to do what's called an alternatives analysis. Look for safer alternatives. Answer the question, is it necessary? This is very similar to what Eka mentioned when he said, the regulators do not innovate. It's the companies. The regulators push. The regulators push the companies to ask the questions. And that's what's happening in California. We don't answer the question, is it necessary? That's up to the manufacturer who wants to sell the product in. However, depending on how they answer that question, yes, it's necessary, no, it's not, I have a safer alternative, then we regulate them accordingly. And there's a whole list of potential regulatory responses. So, how's it going? We're sending signals to the marketplace. Already we're seeing companies saying, we make a product that doesn't have a chemical on that candidate chemical list, therefore buy from us. It's a very powerful signal. REACH has that, now California has it as well. The beauty of this is that it has a mechanism to avoid regrettable substitutes, and that's in the alternatives analysis. And there are people in the audience who know a lot more about alternatives analysis than I do, and when we do the discussion, we can talk about how we're going to be doing that in California. So California and San Francisco were very aware of the SIN list, and in fact, back in 2009, when the first SIN list was launched, we hosted ChemSec in San Francisco to introduce the SIN list to the people of California, and there's been tremendous interest in what goes on with ChemSec, a knowledge that this is a robust list and that there is a lot of great science behind it. That's very important to us, that we've got good science underlying the recommendations from a nonprofit. So we need to create a shared vision. In closing, I heard a wonderful quote at a conference once. People will follow those who lead. If you don't have a vision, all you have is a fight. It's time for us to stop the fight. And the fight is it safe? I don't know. It depends who you ask. The real vision is asking the question, is it necessary? Driving for safer alternatives. Finding the substitutes that are in fact worthy of a substitute. They are not a regrettable substitute that save the planet and save us as human beings. And I believe that in California we have a small step in that direction. I believe Europe is leading the way, and I believe that ChemSec, through its tools that are going to make it easier for us to answer that question, is a great first step. So thank you.